My scalp was an ant farm. No, maybe a flea circus. Mom peeled back my hair, inhaled through her teeth. Writhing creatures camped among my follicles, but for her, there was no flinching. She leaned in closer to the trapeze, split my part wider to enjoy the spectacle. Wow, this isn't just lice. It's lice and maybe something bigger, too. Me, prostrate over her knee, pinched between elbow and lap. Feeling so much smaller than my gawky 8 years old, I cried. I always did. That kid you called Crybaby, it was me, or parallel versions of me. No wonder you've been scratching. Mom raised a hand to her head to attack an itch, then paused, lowered her hand, stared at her fingernails in resignation. Well, guess it's time to put down whiskers. Oh, stop it, I'm kidding. You guessed it, waterfalls. Maybe I was host to fleas in addition to head lice, but Dr. Patani would soon tell us fleas can't live on people long term. My Persian cat was not our chief culprit. The lice were the headliners here, and I knew precisely where the little bastards had come from. They had come from Amy Smith. At that moment in time, Amy Smith was my third best friend. Everyone knew my lice were a gift from Amy Smith, understand, because like clockwork, every 2 weeks, Amy was subjected to head checks and sent home from school. Our third grade classroom took place in a large trailer outside the unfinished school building. We were an island that announcements did not reach. Mr. Bartman received personal calls whenever one of us was summoned away. Maybe a few days before Mom's discovery, the scene played out again. Amy, they need you in the office. Amy, quiet looking in her features, all brown, mousy hair and soft eyes, and she used to smell of her mother's cigarettes and juice bar cotton candy lotion. She nodded, set down her pencil, and left. I knew she'd be gone for the rest of the day, which was a real shame because we'd usually been drawing an obstacle course, a cat treehouse, together, and she didn't finish drawing the trampoline before she left, and not all the cats I drew falling from the tree landed on their feet. My mother likes to say that the problem with my family, the Thomases, is that we've all got such strong personalities. She says this so often that it has been added to the list of customary mom mantras that plague our brains, nestled somewhere between, "Do you think the rain will hurt the rhubarb?" and "Fake it till you make it." She says all these things as though they are inevitable, as though we actually grow rhubarb, as though we have any shot of making it. Making what? When we are, well, Thomases, prone to all the pitfalls that those blessed with strong personalities are destined to face in this world. Quiet was never a guest in the Thomas residence. We were echolocators and used to speaking and getting a response in return. If we sang, we expected backup and half-assed attempts at harmonizing. Our shouting matches could be as competitive as any Olympic sport, and every space in our house played home to its own cacophony. A bass guitar, a farting sousaphone, musical soundtracks, simulated gunfire, Mom in the kitchen beating the living crap out of dough with rolling pins, Dad in the living room with his record spinning, listening not only to echoes but bunnymen. The noise of us goes down to our marrow, and when our bones break, the crack is loud enough to send birds flying. My relationship with Amy Smith was, unbeknownst to me, an arranged friendship. Dad was her champion. As a social worker, he can never actually say so, but he went on more than a couple home visits to Amy's place to see her parents. He put me in weekly lunch group with her, a group for students with emotional impairments. I've since been told that I was supposed to be a role model, but mostly I made fart jokes and disappointed the adults. Once the group was allowed to choose a pair of gloves from the school clothing drive. Me? I plucked the same pair I'd donated. A silver blue pair of soft mittens. Don't you want somebody else to have them? Didn't you donate those, Leah, for someone in need to have them? Amy stood in my peripheries, as usual. I handed them to her, not to be kind, but to alleviate my guilt. And if Amy had them, at least I'd get to see them from time to time. Amy smiled so wide, like she'd never had a pair of gloves before. But if she was in need, she never said so. She never said anything much. After ousting the lice from my head, my parents didn't go so far as burning my stuffed animals, although banishing them to trash bags in the cold attic above the garage for weeks and weeks felt almost as bad. I did the crying thing, naturally, and the pouting for good measure. All three of my siblings chipped in. Oh, we poor unfortunate Thomases, afflicted with the curse of me being friends with Amy Head Lice Smith. Goodbye, Bambi. See you, Spice Girls Barbies. Because who knows, perhaps your shiny manes were made from human hair. There was no goodbye for Amy, though. Not yet. Days later, we were eating lunch together, desk to desk. We had a mutual, unnatural obsession with Furbies. Those mechanical Mogwai clones. Once I brought my Furby in for show and tell. My Furby was hardcore goth. Midnight furred with toe tips painted black. On the playground, I demonstrated to Amy how turning him upside down resulted in robotic cries for help. No, me scared. Wordlessly, Amy took my Furby from me, righted him, and hugged him. I was ashamed. Amy didn't actually own a Furby, but together we'd cut their images off a series of collectible high-C juice boxes and plug them into a photo album. Whenever she had doubles, Amy gave them to me. I didn't have to ask, because Amy listened to even what I wouldn't say. When I found out Amy Smith had given me head lice, she didn't dip in the rankings. Oh, wait. Oh, yeah, we're good. Not even a little. I have always needed noise, yes, and often the noise can be all my own. But more than the noise, I have always needed someone to spit the echoes back, to tell me my noise matters, if only by a smile or a nod. Even if Amy's nods were transferring tiny insects from her skull to mine, they were still nods. And as far as I knew, you couldn't catch anything from smiles. She knew not to torture Furbies. Amy tried to attend a birthday sleepover at my house. When the school heard from some parent or another that she'd been given permission to come visit the Thomas household in the Fawn Lake subdivision, they sent her to the office immediately before she could get aboard my bus. She returned minutes later to collect her backpack and Winnie the Pooh Trapper Keeper from our trailer classroom. She didn't usually cry when they sent her home, but that day she did. She screwed her face up, let snot drip down her lip, but without a peep. And of course I asked Amy how come the lice kept returning. I mean, I had a nasty vinegar bath, some foul-smelling medication poured down my tearful head, a comb torn through damp hair and tapped against the burning candle, and voila! The squirming critters were more or less gone until the next time Amy and I huddled up together in the playground tunnels. Me talking, she listening. Amy shook her head. She mumbled something about her mom making her stand in the shower for the whole day last time she was sent home. But they still came back. They'd never left, of course. Water alone can't unstick lice, but I don't know if knowing that would have made a difference to the Smith family. I imagined what it would feel like to stand under a faucet for hours on end, Mom blocking the door with her arms folded. If you let your fingers get too pruny, did the skin slough off altogether? And what were you underneath? What was Amy underneath? Had she ever seen that? Would she ever tell me, even if she had? And would I ask? We moved away from West Branch after I finished 4th grade, but not before Amy tried one more time to come stay over at my house. She made it to the end of the class after a cleared head check, all but beaming. Got on the bus alongside me, grinning. The remnants of that quiet smile remained intact while we rattled along dirt roads, away from the farms towards the forests and lake. When our feet hit the pavement outside the subdivision, the smile had slipped. And halfway through the long walk across my neighborhood, that smile had never existed. Without warning, Amy sat down in the middle of the road and an amber puddle formed at her feet, on her beaten hand-me-down tennis shoes. Amy, oh man, why didn't you tell me you had to go? Amy only shook her head. Whatever was wrong, whatever fears could make an 8-year-old collapse and piss herself in the center of a neighborhood, were fears that even my family of chatterboxes probably couldn't put words to. I honestly don't remember how I reacted to Amy's tears. I like to think I was compassionate, but probably I just wanted to shuffle her out of the road. A car would be by soon, And we were outside my old babysitter's house where chickens clucked, where a boy named Tony and his pet iguana might see us and tease us come the following school week. Amy Smith would never make it to my house. Dad, returning home from work, found us. Amy quietly sobbing, refusing to move. Me, whatever I was, not crying that time because it had suddenly occurred to me that I'd never had a reason to. Not like Amy did. He told us to get in the car. He'd take Amy home. Dad didn't make her sit on a towel or anything. Of course, Amy didn't say a word during the trip, but for once, neither did I. It would have been dead air if Dad hadn't been blaring Nick Cave through the speakers, telling Amy there'd always be another chance, no worries. He knew where she lived, but I'd never been to that part of town. It wasn't beyond the proverbial train tracks. It was simply deeper into the farm fields that blanketed and pressed flat all of West Branch. This wasn't a farm, no manure, no cows, no income. Just empty fields here, untended. Amy's house looked like half a dilapidated barn. Broken glass, a boarded window, rusting swing set. The smell of juice bar and urine, but no manure when Amy got out of the car. Dad told me to stay in, and he led her to the door. The silhouette of a large woman, the scrawny shadow of an older sibling. No hugs for Amy when she went into her house. When Dad got back in the car, he turned the radio off. I have since wondered about Amy Smith and the selfishness of wanting to be near her and disassociate myself from her at the same time. If you're anything like as morbid as I am, you visited findagrave.com, a search engine for obituaries, complete with photographs of tombstones. Amy Smith has 876 matches at last count. There are probably thousands upon thousands of Amy Smiths out there. When I really think about it, in my school days, I knew more than one of them by any other name. My siblings knew versions of her. We all did, and got better and better at avoiding her under the pretense of avoiding lice or maybe avoiding a sketchy family. We didn't go to their houses, and they didn't come to ours. They couldn't come to ours. And maybe their families lived in shacks in parts of town we'd never seen before, in the peripheries. We won't know what happened to our Amy Smiths. Maybe we don't want to know, because maybe they were worth the head lice, and we don't want to think about that. If I met Amy Smith now, maybe I'd ask her what made her cry and piss herself in the middle of a welcoming subdivision on a warm afternoon. But if she asked me the same question, if she asked about all the forgettable tears I cried for years and years, I think, for once, I would be the one with nothing to say.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's VAMP first-timer Leah Thomas.